Welcome back to another episode of the Meal Prep Monday podcast. I'm your host and founder of Prep Dish, Allison Schaaf. Today, I'm excited for another interview episode. We have Denaye Barahona of the Simple Families podcast. She is a therapist, an author, and I really enjoyed our conversation. We talk a lot about simplifying mealtime, how to make things easy. She even gets into the practical ways that she uses Prep Dish. She has a few tips that I'd never even heard of. So I loved getting into kind of the little details of that are very practical and hopefully some takeaways for all of you listening. Before we get into the episode, a few reminders. One, if you are listening to this podcast episode, remember that we do have all of the interviews up on YouTube if you'd prefer to watch. And if you're watching on YouTube, know that we only put our interviews up on YouTube at this time. So most of our podcast, over 200 episodes, are solo episodes, and those are all found on your favorite podcast app, but you're not going to find them here on YouTube. So if you enjoy today's episode, you may want to look into that. And then before we dive in, I wanted to read some feedback from Prep Dish subscriber Miranda. She said, "Thank you for the opportunity to try your service at no cost for 14 days. It has honestly been a game changer for my family. We are eating healthier meals, spending less money on groceries, and spending less time on meal prep and dishes, etc. I'm so grateful for your service and look forward to being a paid subscriber. Thank you for making this wonderful service available to busy families." Miranda, thank you for the feedback. And if you're listening and would like to try Prep Dish, we have a 2-week free trial. It's the 14 days free that Miranda references. It's at prepdish.com/MPM for Meal Prep Monday. That'll be linked in the show notes. And this is the service that we talk about in this episode today with Denaye. So if you here, and listening to today's episode, if you would like to give it a try, just note that link is there in the show notes. Okay, that is it for the intro. I'm excited for you to get connected and hear the interview with Denaye. Hi, everybody. I am here with Denaye of Simple Families and very excited to chat today. We were actually just talking. There's so many different directions I could go with this interview. She has so many topics. She has a Ph.D. in child development. Is that right? And I just feel like so many topics that you could talk about, from time management to just simplifying family life. But what I would really like to talk to you about today is get into more mealtime and family meals. But before we do that, why don't you just do a quick introduction of yourself and your background?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am the founder of Simple Families. Simple Families is a podcast and a community. I've been podcasting, since 2017, I think. So a long time. My PhD is in child development. I also have a master's in clinical social work. So in addition to podcasting, I'm also a therapist. I work with parents and children. I've worked for many years with parents and children who have behavior challenges, anxiety, a whole range of different types of neurodivergence. And meal times and food comes up a lot, whether it's picky eating or getting kids to sit at the table, or how to manage the mental load of meal prep and food. But I think that meal prep and food and all of the things are on the minds of parents everywhere all the time.
Great. And I just want to do a quick little insertion to say Prep Dish has been a longtime sponsor of the Simple Families podcast. And there's a good chance that some of you listening today have come to us through Simple Families. We've always loved partnering with Denaye. This episode today, not sponsored in any way, but just excited to get your insight. And because you are so familiar with Prep Dish as well, just hear more about how, you're handling meals and any suggestions you have there. So first of all, I sometimes like to start with more of a why and then get into the how. So tell us a little bit more about why family meals. Why should people be interested in sitting down as a family?
Yeah, well, there is definitely research to support that the family meal fosters positive well-being and relationships. Now, I think that one of the things that gets a little bit hazy with that research is that if the family mealtime is really painful and miserable for everyone, is that really fostering well-being? Is that really improving our relationships with one another? So I think that we all kind of have this dream of family meals and sitting down and having a nice meal together. But for a lot of us, that is what it is. It's an idealized dream of what that's supposed to look like. So, and, I did an episode on family dinners recently, kind of talking about this, is really capturing the idealization of what we think it's supposed to look like versus what it actually looks like. And those things are very different. I don't know if you've had that experience personally, Allison.
I mean, I have a 3-year-old and a 4.5-year-old. So I have diving headfirst into fantasy versus reality. Let's say that.
Right. Yes. Yes, absolutely. It's tricky, I think. And, it's interesting that, and I don't want to stereotype dads, but it tends to be a lot of dads that have idealized images. I think moms do too. But for whatever reason, in my practice, I work with a lot of dads who feel like if the mealtime is not peaceful, and when I say peaceful, everyone's sitting around for an extended period of time, talking about their day, eating the food that is served, which definitely includes green vegetables. If that's not happening, that something's going wrong and they're doing something wrong. And that's just not necessarily the case. And I actually had someone recently who said to me, so it's not like Parenthood, like the show. Do you remember that show? I loved that show.
Yeah.
But in that show, it was, there were 4 adult children and they all had grandchildren, and they had this big, it was definitely somewhere in Southern California, probably this big outdoor table where they all gathered at least once, maybe twice a week. I don't know, probably like 30 of them. And they all sat around the table, and it wasn't always peaceful, but they were always together. And it was this really beautiful gathering place. And I think that images like that, like we see in a lot of movies, a lot of TV shows, can really make us feel like that's how it's supposed to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it sounds like, so go a little bit more into like developmentally what's appropriate. And I always like to think of it too as like, okay, different seasons, it's going to look differently, right? Depending on what you have going on, but what expectations are realistic?
Yeah. Well, different seasons and different kids.
Yes.
My kids have never an easy time sitting for extended periods at the table. And I have seen other kids that do have an easier time with it. And I think we have to be careful as parents not to blame ourselves for that, right? I think, I think I talked about this in an episode on my podcast recently. Last summer I was at the pool and we had met another family who have same age kids, a boy and a girl, same age. My kids are 7 and 9, same age, at the pool. And we're like, let's meet at the pool at noon. So we all met at the pool at noon, and my kids jumped right in the pool, and they were like, oh, we're going to grab some food, like at the little restaurant. So they sat down and got some hot dogs and French fries, whatever, the pool food. And they sat at the table, at the picnic table, for it was probably an hour, just sitting there eating and talking while my kids are like in the pool, like animals, just like splashing around, being like, where are they? What are they doing? And I just watched her like, wow, like they're just eating, like they're just sitting there eating. Wow. And it's just so different because that's just my kids they don't do that. They never have. And I think they will someday for sure. And it has increased over the years. The amount of time that they're sitting has changed over the years. But I do think some kids are more inclined to sit and to linger versus other kids, have higher energy levels, like to change it up, mix things up, and are on the move a lot more. And I think that sometimes we have to roll with that and embrace it and be okay with it.
Yeah. I mean, in my household, I think it's more that it's just not consistent. I have one that will sit down, and sometimes it's like, oh my gosh, we've been sitting down for over half an hour and he's still kind of eating. And I think it's like those growth spurt phases, but then other nights it will be 5 or 10 minutes and he's like, I'm done. And so I just I can't predict, I can't predict how long our meal times are going.
Right. Yeah. And there's not really a magic window for how long they're supposed to be. But what we do know is that kids eat better. They eat more variety of food when they have positive atmosphere at the table. So if you're hounding them to eat, if you're pressuring them to eat, if you're nagging them, whatever it is, if there's a lot of stress at the table, not only are they not going to want to be there, but also they're not going to eat as well, not eat as much variety, probably not as much of a quantity either. So in that, I know is really tricky. It's like what I'm saying here is be really kind and gentle and sweet and loving and happy at the meal table.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, that can be really tricky, because sometimes when you do all of those things and you don't set clear expectations, then kids wander away quickly too. So it's kind of finding this magic balance of, this positive atmosphere, but at the same time, consistency. Like you said, I think that consistency piece is really important. And for us, Prep Dish has been a huge part of that because you can't have consistency without having a meal at the table, right? And, we've gone through stages, and especially last school year, my son was getting off the bus really late. He didn't get off the bus till like 5:10. And I was letting him eat in front of the TV, which worked for us in that season. He had a very long school day. He was exhausted and he was starving when he got home. And for almost the whole school year, he ate his dinner sitting in front of the TV for his 45 minutes of screen time every evening. And during that season, that worked fine. And now we have pivoted back to where we're joining each other at the table. He's getting home earlier. I have more support at home, and we're getting a regular family meal. So I don't want you to think that if you're in a phase right now that you're not eating together at the table, or you're not doing it every night, that you're never going to be able to get there. It's in seasons, right?
Yeah, for sure. Well, let's get into, you kind of mentioned Prep Dish, but let's get into a little more how that's happening at your house. Like, how have you found, ways to make sure that that is consistent, that you are able to have a meal every night?
Yeah. Well, having support, that's been a huge, huge piece for me. My husband and I both work full time. And in the early years when my kids were young, I worked from home, and we had au pairs, which are foreign, young, mostly women, young men and women from foreign countries that come to spend a year to help with kids. And they have cultural exchange. And we loved that program for a couple of years when my kids were young. The challenge with au pairs is that they're not really there for household stuff. They're just really there to help with the kids. So they could help a little bit with cooking, but not anything significant. So, for the first, I don't know, my kids are 7 and 9 now. So for the first really like 9 years, in the years that we had au pairs, I had a little bit of help from them, but mostly help from my partner with executing on Prep Dish. And gosh, I don't even know now, if I had to guess how long we've been using Prep Dish, probably almost 5 or 6 years.
You have to look
but
back.
For me, that was, yeah. But the magic really in the beginning was I felt so overwhelmed every day by the time we got to mealtime, because my husband was never home during the meal prep hours. He was barely home in time to actually sit down and eat. Most nights, not even home in time to eat with us. So I was the one that was always there, responsible for all of it. And because I worked from home, so I was always there during dinner time, the dinner hour. And it was so, so overwhelming to me. So it felt so magical to have and discover Prep Dish, where we could do it on Saturday night or Sunday night, and we could do all the prep so that when it came time during the week, I didn't feel like I was going it alone. So for a long time, most of our time using Prep Dish, that's kind of how it's been, is we've divided and conquered on the weekend or in the evening after the kids have gone to bed. And then I've executed on dish day and put the food on the table. And just starting in September, we have a nanny for the first time, which is a little different from an au pair. They have a little more flexibility in what they can do. So when she came on board, now that my kids are at school during the day, I told her, I was like, one of the things I really would love to have help with is the meal prep and getting dinner ready. So the first thing I did was teach her how to use Prep Dish, because it's such an easy tool to divide and conquer with anybody, anybody that's there to support you.
Yeah, no, I love hearing that, because that's one of the, beauties or ways that I try to design, is so that it doesn't just have to be you. It's, it can be split up, because it's laid out. There doesn't have to be a lot of communication and back and forth. It can be like, hey, here's the plan, and everyone can kind of pick up and drop off where the other was starting and stopping. So when you're using that, do you have like a set prep day? Do you have a number of meals? And then do you have other strategies for meals that you're not using Prep Dish? How are you kind of looking at the week and your meal planning?
Yeah. So I'm consistently inconsistent about everything in life, I think, as many of us are.
Good to hear.
So I will say that the first few times that we did Prep Dish, we used the full gluten-free meals, because I'm gluten-free, the full meal plans, and loved the food. It was amazing. But then realized there was no way we were going to consistently keep showing up to do so much prep. So we pretty quickly changed over to the super fast meals, which is a much better fit for my interest level in cooking, which is fairly low. I'm not someone that loves to spend a lot of time in the kitchen, and it's more of a duty, like get the job done. So for me, the super fast meal prep instructions are always really great. So I usually lean towards that. And I've actually found that with the super fast meals that most of the time, if I don't do the prep day, I can still do the dish day in like
Mhm.
very quickly. So some weeks, if I miss the prep day altogether, I still use it just kind of as like a guide to get the dish on the table, even if I didn't do the prep in advance, because it's that easy. It's sort of like I view it as like, oh, 5 easy recipes to make. So I think that that's one of the changes that I make sometimes is that I don't, in fact, get it done and don't do dish or prep day. And I
Mhm.
still use dish day just as is. And then something for lunch, what we typically do is I have a really, really big Dutch oven. And on Sundays, I'll make a giant pot of soup, some kind of really hearty soup with a lot of protein. And that's just lunch for my husband and I for the week. So we just take that every day. We take a couple scoops for lunch. And that has really helped to cut our eating out costs at lunchtime and to make it a little bit healthier too. So and my son eats at school. He has a hot lunch at school. And my daughter, we have to pack for her, which is less simple because she's a kid that doesn't love a lot of the things that get packed in lunches. Like she's not a big sandwich eater. So we do like a bento box type thing and we mix it up with kind of a range of stuff for her.
Okay, great. Yeah. And I love hearing how you do lunches because that's something we get asked a lot is like, what is the best strategy there? And I think it's, if you can find something like that where it's like, hey, one thing at the beginning of the week, then you're set. And like you said, save a lot on eating out. And also, what's going in there. So you're not having all the unknowns of when you're eating out and trying
Yeah.
to figure out healthy options.
Yeah. And I'll usually use that big pot of soup as our Sunday dinner too. So
Oh,
it'll kind of do double duty as the one evening meals and then the meal for the week too.
that's a great idea.
It's a really big pot.
I was going to say that must be like really big.
Yeah.
I have a really big
And we're
pot.
also okay with eating the same thing over and over. So that
Mhm.
works for us. I know that doesn't work for everybody though.
And does it fit in your fridge?
Yeah, it does. It completely takes the fridge over, but that's okay. We make it work.
And you have one fridge or do you have two fridges?
We have one regular size fridge and
Huh.
we've recently just got like a mini fridge, but that's more just for like drinks and that kind of thing. So we don't put any food in there. My husband, that's like his place where he organizes beverages that nobody touches. He has like his different flavors of sparkling watercolor coordinated, all facing the front. Very
Amazing.
very meticulous and no one it's that's his space. When
Nice.
everything in your life feels chaotic and the kids take over everything else, I think you have to reclaim what you can.
I love it. An organized beverage fridge. I mean, you got to take
Yes.
it where you
Yes,
can.
absolutely. I have to ask him like, is it okay if I take a purple one? Like, is that okay? Am I going to mess up the order here?
I like your husband.
Yes.
Any other tips or suggestions or things that people need to be thinking about when it comes to family meal and getting everyone around the table? This has all been really helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I think just breathe into it and to remind yourself that there are seasons, right? And seasons in that when your kids are young, this is going to feel harder. It's going to get a little bit easier, probably never going to be easy. But, after school, especially during the week, if you have kids that don't love to linger at the table, that's okay. I think for at least from what I hear from parents, the overwhelming majority of kids actually share more at bedtime, like when they're laying down in calm, getting ready to go to sleep. That's kind of the time where they share more about their day and have more intimacy during that moment. So I think if you feel like mealtime's not quote unquote working for you, maybe kind of re-envision it to be something different and not necessarily the big point of connection for you every day. Finding a different way to connect that feels more comfortable for you and more comfortable for your kids and have those checkpoints to be something that works for everyone, not just something that you saw on TV. So,
Yeah, thank you. No, I think it resonates with a lot of what I've mentioned in the past of like, it really is you have to look at the season and, realize that things are going to shift and change. But I think in the long run, it's worth the effort, but just being flexible with what it's going to look like depending on what you have going on and the ages of your kids and stages of your kids. So wonderful.
yeah. Well, and if you're using Prep Dish, I think one of my other favorite tips is that sometimes what I'll do with the super fast menus is I'll just pick 2 meals off of it and then I'll double them. So I'm really only making 2 meals. This is like the super lazy way to do the super lazy menu. So, Allison, you make it really easy in that you number all the ingredients and all the
Yep.
steps. So it's really easy to cross meals off for people that haven't discovered that. Sometimes I'll just cross off 3 meals and keep 2 and then just double the quantity or even triple the quantity. And then we just eat a lot of leftovers that week. So that's kind of my simplifying the already simple hack.
I feel like we got all the way to the end for you to give like this really special, like, I love that. I haven't heard that like specifically in that way. So that's a really great tip. So thank you for sharing that. I'm sure.
Oh, and one other thing that I would love for you to think about
Okay.
would be to try to make some kind of feature where you would divide it up for 2 people who are partnering together, where it's kind of like the blue text is for one person, the red text is for another person. If like you kind of like equalize the tasks, like this is for the person who likes to chop and this is for the person who likes to like cook, or you know what I mean? So it's kind of like you can divide and conquer, but it's already done for you. Because I think if you do that, it's going to sort of make this as like, this is what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to split this part up. It's less on just one person. Right. So I think that, I don't know, making it a little more friendly in that way.
I see us being the the start of some conflicts, but I like where you're going with that.
Could be. Right. Maybe it could be an option where you could like click on the partner friendly menu. So.
Yeah, that's a good idea. And I mean, it's interesting the way people do split it up, whether it's with a partner or a nanny or, someone, a babysitter, even kids. I think as kids get older, I know some parents have the kid get home from school. And if they're in high school, they get it started. So there's so many different ways to, split that up and change up who's doing what. It doesn't need to all fall in one person. So that's definitely the goal with it as well. So great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you. This has been so insightful. Lots of great tips in here. Let people know, where can they find you? Where can they connect with you?
Sure. The podcast is at simplefamilies.com. You can also find it anywhere that podcasts are found, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all over. So
great. Thank you. Yeah. Make sure and check out her podcast. She covers a lot of topics, actually some similar topics to what we cover here, but goes really deep into just a lot of really interesting topics related to simplifying family life. So thank you so much for being here, Denaye. I appreciate all of the work you do and your support of Prep Dish.
Of course. Thanks, Allison.
Denaye, thank you so much for joining us. That was such a helpful episode. I feel like we could have kept talking. I know you are such a wealth of knowledge when it comes to families and just so much. So thank you for coming on. If you guys want to hear more from Denaye, like she mentioned, she has the Simple Families podcast. It's similar content to what we talked about here. So definitely go check that out. A reminder that if you want to try out Prep Dish, it's the meal planning service that gives you, a grocery list and prep ahead instructions, help you to just make mealtime quick and easy. So go to prepdish.com/MPM for our 2-week free trial. It's the best way to try it out. You get 14 days free to see if it's a fit for you before you have to pay for anything. So that's linked below. And then gosh, that's all I have for today. But if you are a longtime listener or you're watching here on YouTube and you like these episodes, if you could give us a thumbs up, do a rating, a review if you're listening, it just helps other people to find our podcast, find our content. I really appreciate seeing those reviews. It just kind of helps keep us going here. So that's all I have for this week. I'll be back again next Monday with another episode.